The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 41. Connections, Convalescence, and Courage. February 1998. The middle of February found Richard Granger feeling a bit of relief, for the first time in several months, over this whole fixer-elixir nonsense. Quarter 4 earnings had finished strong, and Quarter 1 and 2 futures were looking even better. Additionally, he had found an excellent silent partner to bring into the organization. As the adults had gathered in the parlor after Christmas dinner, Sirius Black had passed around a curious concoction that was both delicious and calming. It had a smooth finish with no bitter aftertaste. "I hope you don't mind trying a bit of my own invention," Sirius had explained to the group. "Being holed up in here for years on end, I haven't had much to do besides reading and potion making. I've seen adverts for this drink in the Muggle market, and it made me think of a few ideas of my own." Everyone gave Sirius rave reviews, but it gave Richard an idea. He approached the man and asked to speak with him in private. "So you're telling me that Fixer Elixir is Voldemort's product?" Sirius asked in disgusted disbelief, after Richard told him about his part in the brand. "In name only. In reality, the whole campaign is entirely the brainchild of myself and a wizard, another reluctant Death Eater. All of the proceeds are going to support a Muggle-born integration into the school. Voldemort doesn't know that, of course." "I should assume not," smirked Sirius. Then he sighed, his face growing grave once more. "I'm not sure I like this, Richard. This is a dangerous game you're playing." "It was the Order's idea," Richard grumbled. "When we suggested a distraction, we meant telling him that we had giants of our own, or thunderbirds at the ready, something like that," Sirius said uncertainly. "It has worked quite well," Richard said, in an effort to persuade him. "Voldemort is convinced that we will turn this into world domination, somehow." A slow, amused smile crept across Sirius's face. "Tell me, who is this other wizard, the reluctant Death Eater?" "His name is Quentin Jugson," Richard replied. "He's a half-blood. He went to a Muggle university. He doesn't want to be a Death Eater, but you know how that can be. Once you are one, it's impossible not to be one." Sirius nodded slowly. "I knew Jugson. He was a year younger than my brother, Regulus, a few years behind me. They were friends early in their Hogwarts years, but as my brother moved further towards the dark arts, they grew apart. I recall being surprised to learn that he had joined the Death Eaters. Will you consider coming on board? Expanding the brand? Perhaps take on a bit of the workload? Between my dental practice and attending meetings on both sides of this fight, I'm like a candle burning at both ends." Sirius finally nodded. The next day, Richard called Jugson and requested a meeting. When he explained exactly who was coming on board to handle product development and expansion, the wizard was silent for some time. "Cat got your tongue?" Richard asked. "I knew Sirius many years ago. I was surprised to hear that he'd joined up with the Death Eaters when the Potters were killed. He never struck me as the blood supremacy type, like his brother Regulus. He and Regulus were very different from each other. It was Regulus, was it not, who found you years ago and brought you into the Dark Lord's fold?" Richard was uncertain which way to go with this, but he had now spent enough time with Jugson to know that the man was no typical Death Eater. "In actuality, I did not know Regulus." "But now you just happen to know Sirius Black. The same Sirius Black who never comes to meetings, and is never mentioned among the Death Eaters?" Jugson asked slowly. "I do know him," Richard answered evenly. There was a moment of silence between the two men. Then Jugson looked him in the eye and whispered, "When this is over, if this is over, and if you're still alive, will you tell them I wasn't entirely evil?" Richard's brow wrinkled in confusion. "What are you talking about? Who should I tell this?" "I told you. I knew the Black Brothers at Hogwarts. Regulus may have joined the ranks of Death Eater, but I knew that Sirius never did, never would, despite what the papers said. So, when the time comes, can you let them know?" "Who?" "The Order. That's who you're really working for, isn't it?" Jugson asked softly. "I'm afraid I don't—" "Richard, I know the score here. I'm probably not going to make it out of this alive, and even if by some miracle I do, I am branded for life." He gestured to his left arm. "When history is written about this time, I'm going to be remembered as being on the wrong side. But perhaps you can let them know I didn't want this. I didn't want to be evil." Richard sat perfectly still for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Yes, I'll make sure they know." By close to the end of February, Ron was mostly healed from his splinching. However, he'd had difficulty adjusting to living in a tent. Whilst the Black House had not been particularly hospitable, it at least had been warm, with soft bedding and 3 hot meals a day. Life in the tent was more primitive. They were able to scrounge a bit of food, either on their own or with creatures' help. But their warming charms faded after a few hours, and an old shoe transfigured into a bed still felt and smelt a bit like an old shoe. To make matters worse for both of them, they were taking it in turns to wear Slytherin's locket, afraid of leaving it unprotected in the tent. It was Harry's night to wear the locket, and he was unable to sleep. The locket gave him vivid, horrifying dreams that he knew were probably seated in reality. Like several nights before now, he awoke and went to stand in the doorway of the tent, looking out. It was then that the doe appeared. Awash in silvery light, the beautiful creature came to the edge of their wards, stomping her feet lightly in greeting. Harry took one look at her and knew that she meant no harm. When she turned and cantered away, he could not help but follow. When she stopped and lowered her head as though to drink from the small pool of water, he approached slowly. Her ethereal light bathed the pool in brightness, and he could just make out a glint of silver and red. Peering down into the pool, he knew precisely what it was he was seeing, although its presence made no sense here. The doe faded from existence as quickly and as easily as it had arrived. He plunged his hand into the pool, but the sword of Gryffindor was far too deep to reach. He looked around, shivering. It was too cold for a swim. The light snow on the ground had been here since they'd arrived, and the packed earth was nearly frozen solid. "Accio sword," he said through chattering teeth, but the sword did not move. He had not expected it to. He had no alternative. This, then, was the act of courage needed to claim the prize. He quickly stripped down to his pants, and before he could lose his nerve, dove in. Down, down he swam as quickly as possible, before his limbs seized with cold. His frigid fingers closed around the hilt and pulled the sword free easily. But something was wrong. When he tried to rise to the surface, something pulled him back. It was as though a dozen Grindylows had him round the neck, but he could see nothing in the murky light of his wand above the pool. His last thought as he lost consciousness was that, somehow, this didn't feel particularly valorous. When he awoke, he was surprised to be breathing air and not nearly frozen water. "Are you mental?" Ron's voice asked from next to him. "What the fuck were you thinking? Going in there with that thing on?" "The sword," Harry managed to croak. "It's still in the pool." "You mean this sword, mate?" Ron held up the glittering sword of Gryffindor. "Yeah, you wouldn't let go of it, but you couldn't swim with it either, so somehow I managed to get both of you to the surface. Do me a favour and don't let this quest kill you before you-know-who gets his chance." Despite his lack of feeling in his extremities, Harry could not help but giggle. "You know what this means, Ron?" At the other wizard's questioning look, he said, "It was your act of valour, not mine, that took place down there. That means the sword is yours to use, you know." Even though the temperature was far below comfortable, Ron blushed. "Bit of an overstatement, don't you think?" "No, Ron, listen, mate. The locket affects you differently than it does me. I mean, I know it just tried to drown me, but when you wear it—" Ron looked down, ashamed. "Yeah, I know. Bit of an asshole when I wear it. I don't know. Makes me think all kinds of thoughts. Not good ones. I realise I'm not the most well-adjusted, confident bloke. It kind of comes with the territory, considering my brothers and all. Dragon tamers and curse breakers and ministry officials and business owners. And then me. Add to that my best friend's nickname is literally the Chosen One." Harry interrupted. "I didn't choose that, you know." Ron laughed. "I know, Harry, but it's difficult sometimes, you know? Being only me." "I know, Ron," Harry said quietly. "That's why this needs to be only you." 10 minutes later, the locket, now cleaved in two, and the sword of Gryffindor packed safely away in the bag of important items, the two Gryffindors apparated back to the Black House at last. Harry had been right. They had needed to leave the comfort of the house in order to find that valor within themselves. But after several weeks away, they were happy to be back indoors again. February 26th, 1998. Tonks was bored. Her pregnancy had been going well, right up until the 9th month, when everything seemed to go to hell in a handbasket all at once. Her healer at St. Mungo's insisted that this was perfectly normal in magical pregnancies. The baby was becoming more aware of his or her surroundings, and was possibly sparking small doses of accidental magic. The solution was an abundance of caution, meaning bed rest, which Tonks found incredibly tedious. As Remus was still working for both MI6 and the Order, she had returned to her mother's house, only to be reminded of why she no longer lived with her mother. Andromeda Tonks was well-meaning but smothering. She was constantly in the room to fluff pillows or offer food and drinks. She'd brought in books and an unreal number of magazines, and even a Muggle television. After 3 days of watching Muggle celebrity gossip, soap operas, and game shows, Tonks could feel her brain falling apart. It didn't help that every other advert break featured the catchy jingle of the Fixer Elixir advert. Even after turning it off, she could still hear that blasted song. "If you need a pick-me-up, need it faster and quicker, just pick up a bottle of the Fixer Elixir." She dozed off, dreaming about blasting a bottle of Fixer Elixir with an incendio hex. She woke up with a little smile on her face. But the dream had jogged loose in her mind dormant thoughts about cups and fires. She had promised Harry, Ron, and Hermione 2 months ago that she would look more into the process for destroying Horcruxes. She'd also agreed to mull over the mystery of Hufflepuff's cup. She felt a bit guilty, having done very little of either. Between having to maintain a facade of normalcy with the Auror department, which had been taken over with every other department of the Ministry by Voldemort, her work with the Order, her assignments with MI6, and her new husband and her pregnancy, the weeks had slipped away without her realizing it. That wouldn't do at all, she resolved. She summoned several arcane work manuals and set to reading. Several hours later she felt mildly reassured that, if the time came that she needed to create fiend fire, she could control it, as long as she had competent help. She turned her thoughts to the cup. Where could it be? Harry had not revealed what other objects had been turned into Horcruxes, nor where the objects had been located. She picked up her mobile phone. "Harry, it's Tonks. Need to talk with you. Can I call?" A reply came 5 minutes later. "Yes, now is a good time." 10 minutes later, Harry was pacing frantically in the room he shared with Ron when his ginger roommate returned from the kitchen, where he'd gone for a snack. "What's wrong?" Ron asked, his defenses immediately alert. "Tonks. Is the baby okay?" "Yes," Harry answered. "The baby's fine. At least I'm pretty sure. She called about the cup. She wants to know about the others. Should we tell her, do you reckon?" Harry looked his friend in the eyes. "I think we need to. I just got off the phone with her. We should pay her a visit." Ron looked down mournfully at the giant sandwich he had just made himself. "Do you think I could—" "Leave it, mate." Harry apparated the pair of them to a country lane in a shaded wood. "Where are we?" Ron asked, looking around. There was no house in sight. Ron took the mobile from his pocket. "Sorry, look at this message." Ron focused on the tiny screen. "The Tonks residence is at 208 Broomhole Road, Surrey." "She's secret keeper?" Ron whispered, and Harry nodded. There was a popping sound nearby, and they turned as a grey blur pushed itself between two trees, forming slowly into a house. Once inside, Ron was pleased to learn that Andromeda Tonks had all the makings for a delicious sandwich, and was simply aching for someone to dote upon, considering her daughter was having none of it. An hour later, Tonks had gone from the lethargy of endless bed rest to the excitement of knowing that an adventure was on the horizon. Harry had told her where the locket, ring, and diaries had been kept during Voldemort's time in hiding. Then he had discussed all the places that they'd been, looking for the cup and whatever objects of Rowena Ravenclaw's he could discover. She knew he hadn't told her everything about the Horcruxes. It would be foolish to do so, she assured him. Dangerous information such as that should be compartmentalized, so that if one person were captured and tortured for knowledge, all of the information wasn't lost. But she had enough of the big picture to come up with a few theories. "Let me think on all of this," she told the two wizards. "I must tell you, in my current state, I'm somewhat useless as far as retrieving these objects, but I will at least try to think of where they could be." Harry nodded. "Thanks for your help, and good luck with the delivery. How long do you think until the baby comes?" "No more than a few weeks," Tonks said, "and I'm beyond ready. He's been sitting on my bladder for about a month now." "Is going to be a boy?" Ron asked, looking a bit disappointed. "Oh, that will be nice, I suppose. Of course, my family has plenty of them." Tonks laughed as the two young wizards departed. Over the next several days, Tonks considered everything she had heard. The locket had been sealed in a cave, a place that had meant something important to Voldemort. According to Harry, it had been a symbol of his power over others, particularly Muggles. The ring had been hidden away in his ancestral home, a tie into his family history, his connection with Salazar Slytherin. But the diary was something else entirely. It had been left in the care of Lucius Malfoy, one of Voldemort's most loyal servants. Would Voldemort have trusted more than one Horcrux to a devoted follower? Tonks picked up her mobile and scrolled through her contacts. She quickly tapped out a message. R, it's Tonks. Need to talk to you. Call when you can. 15 minutes later, the mobile rang. Hiya, Tonks. How can I help? Richard asked. Sorry to bother you, Richard. You've told us everyone in you-know-who's in a circle, but who, specifically, are his closest people? Richard considered. I think Lucius is pretty high up there. Dolohov, Yaxley, probably. But I get the sense that he's always thought of Bellatrix as one of his closest. Certainly she's one of his most eager. Tonks thanked him, and lay back in bed to think. Lucius was entrusted with one of these Horcruxes, and he hadn't even been Voldemort's closest henchman. Would he have given Bellatrix this same honour? Undoubtedly so. If I were Bellatrix, where would I hide a cup or a tiara? Tonks asked herself. But try as she might, she wasn't sure she could get into the witch's head, and there would be no room for error. She would likely only get one shot at retrieving the Horcrux. If she couldn't ask her lovely Aunt Bellatrix herself, she'd have to do the next best thing. Talk to Bellatrix's sister. She checked the calendar. It was Wednesday. She was in luck. Wednesday was Andromeda's night, where she met Tonks's father at the safe house in Bristol. There would be a small window of time to plan. She picked up her mobile once more. Narcissa, are you busy this evening? Any chance you can collect Linda and come round Route 7? The Angels are due for a reunion. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Muggle Death Eater by Great78.